So I'm very, very, very excited. I don't know about you, but I like the thought of becoming my own Chief Effervescent Officer. I like the sound of that. We already have a Chief Effervescent Officer within the AFPP, but I like the sound of becoming one, and we're going to learn how. So I'm going to welcome Celynn Morin to the stage. Come on ahead. You're looking very beautiful. Celynn, thank you so much for coming to speak to us this afternoon. Celynn is a registered dietitian. She's an award-winning speaker and author of 2 books and a workplace well-being consultant. She has a practical and playful approach to holistic well-being. Celynn does this by helping work individuals connect with their mind, heart, body and spirit in a way that supports their well-being. Now, there is more, but she can tell you that herself. I'm very excited that there's champagne on the stage. Not quite sure what's going to happen with that. But Celynn, thank you so much for coming, and the stage is now yours. Thank you. You look beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So what does Santé mean? Yeah, it's French for health. So you can have good health, bonne santé, or poor health, mauvaise santé. And the other meaning of santé? Cheers. Yeah. So, when we say cheers, santé, we are inviting the request, an invitation, a blessing for good health, bonne santé, to ourselves and to whoever we are connecting with. And why is that so important? Because when we ask for good health, for many reasons, it gives us opportunity. So this is a wonderful Chinese proverb. A healthy person has 1,000 wishes. A sick person has just one. And I know that this is an audience that understands that meaning very well. And just like in this glass of sparkling drink, there are maybe 1,000 bubbles. Apparently, there are 250 million bubbles in a bottle of champagne. Did you know that? When we have these options, we can do a lot, right? Now, why am I standing with a glass of sparkling wine, and why is there a bottle of champagne on the stage, and we're talking about well-being? When you see people, a family, a couple, enjoying a glass of sparkling anything, it can be champagne, cava, English sparkling wine, Prosecco, what do you assume? They're celebrating. That's the first thing. So we become curious about why are they connecting over a sparkling drink. Is it a birthday? Is it maybe an anniversary, a milestone, a graduation? And those 3 things, curiosity, the fact that we're connecting, and celebration are really important ingredients for well-being. So if we think about curiosity helps our mind. So when it comes to well-being, you know, if it was all easy and simple, we would all be healthier and happier and fitter. It isn't as simple. In fact, a lot of the knowledge and things that I'm going to share with you, we know. However, common knowledge isn't always common practice. So we're also going to chat about how do we actually make some changes if you would like to potentially improve your mindset, your mental health, your emotional well-being, and perhaps how you feel in terms of energy and effervescence. So curiosity is key, because if you stay curious, you can help keep a growth mindset and have endless possibilities no matter what's happening around, specifically with your well-being. Then connection is important. So when we connect with others, and specifically if we connect with ourselves, we're able to show up more authentically, and that helps with emotional intelligence and enhancing the quality of our relationships. Also, connection can help us to better manage stress, especially if we connect with our emotions and not suppress them, because what we suppress, the body ends up expressing, and sometimes in very unhealthy ways. And then that third ingredient, when you see somebody or a group of people sharing a sparkling drink, the celebration piece, is about how we choose to show up. Because celebration requires a sense of energy and action that shows that maybe you're joyful or happy, or at least feeling a sense of gratitude. And these are the three things that we're going to weave through our time together, is how can we, and perhaps you could ask yourself, how can I be curious about how this conversation could help my well-being? How could I potentially connect with myself? And if you would like to, because it's all a choice, how could you bring in a little bit more celebration? And celebration is important for many reasons. I'm just going to share with you two. The one thing we know from neuroscience is if we want to create new behaviors around our lifestyle, around our health and well-being, it helps to feel good about them so that we stick to doing them, because we change most when we feel good as opposed to feeling bad. And most of the time when it comes to this well-being stuff, we don't really have fun. We don't feel like we're celebrating it. It's all about deprivation and denial. And so we end up setting ourselves up for failure as opposed to success. And when I say celebration, I do not mean that you have to have a bottle of bubbly. In fact, it's really important to find moments that you can celebrate. For me, I call them champagne moments, where it's the simple things that happen day to day. So rather than waiting for a big milestone event to open a bottle of bubbly, is to find moments in your day, perhaps as simple as this one. A few days ago, I was walking on my local beach, which is the Witterings. I live in Chichester, and I wasn't particularly happy. I had just come back from Inverness after being to a funeral, which is always quite sad when someone transitions. However, there was a moment where the clouds parted and this ray of sunshine came and hit my face. And I took a deep breath in, and I was just like, in this moment, I feel joyful. And that's for me the difference between happiness and joy. Because happiness is how we feel when things go our way, right? When maybe our kids are healthy and well, work isn't maybe too stressful, we've got some extra cash, we may be going on holiday. So it's all about the external world and hooray when things work out. But it's often out of our control. Things like the weather, for instance. Whereas joy is a state, it's an internal quality, an internal way of being that we bring to the world regardless of what's happening around us. And so when I speak about celebration, it's more about how can you not compromise on your inner joy as you go about work and life, considering that there's so much out of our control. From what happens inside surgery rooms, right outside, to the weather on a weekend, just when you have the time off. And is this easy? No, it's not. But if we create small changes, a bit like inside this glass, there are lots of bubbles that are rising up to the surface. There's not one big bubble that makes a bottle or a glass of anything sparkling. It's those thousands, hundreds, thousands, millions, apparently, bubbles that come up and arise and are effervescent to the surface, that make a drink effervescent and sparkling. And so it's the small little things that you choose to do every day that will add up to the sense of effervescence, not all the time, but most of the time. How can you keep this inner sense of effervescence and joy regardless of what's happening around you? Shawn Achor is a professor. Some of you, I don't know if you've come across his book, Happiness Advantage. I see some nods over there. His most recent research highlights 4 things that can help us maintain a sense of joy. One of the things is something that I'd like to invite us to do right now. It's like a little bubble of time. When people take 2 minutes out of their day to focus on their breathing and go inward for a mindful 120 seconds, when they come back to their work, they are not only more accurate, they also have a sense of being happier, but they also impact the cortisol levels of people around them. That's really exciting. So when you choose to feel a little bit more joyful, you potentially can help your colleagues around you have less cortisol. So how about we do that? I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes, and I invite you to, as you are right now, bring your awareness to your body that supports it on the chair. If you would like to, you can soften your gaze so that you don't keep getting this visual stimulation, and if you feel comfortable to do so, you can even close your eyes. And bring your awareness to your chest where your heart is beating. And notice your inhale, perhaps your chest lifts and expands. And as you exhale, your chest might drop. And on your next in-breath, What would it be like if you took in a little bit more oxygen, so breathed a little bit deeper, maybe allowing your belly to feel like it was filling with air? And as you exhaled, to lengthen your exhale, as you exhale through your mouth. So inhale through your nose, a little bit deeper than usual, and exhale through your mouth. And on your next exhale, allow your shoulders to drop a little bit more towards the ground. Let your neck, your jaw, your forehead, your face relax. We carry so much tension in the upper body. And as you take a few more deep, nourishing breaths, I invite you to think of someone or a pet or a place that makes you happy, that brings you joy, that makes you feel grateful or maybe even love. So hold that person or that place or that pet in your mind, perhaps even placing them where your heart is, so you can feel the feeling of joy, gratitude, love in your heart, in your chest. And take 2 more slow, deep breaths. Make these the deepest, most nourishing breaths you've taken all day, perhaps all conference. And let the corners of your mouth slightly lift, perhaps even bringing a full smile to your face. And if your eyes are closed, to gently open them and let the light back in. And notice how that feels. 2 minutes of mindful contemplation, connecting with yourself. Right now, not only are your cortisol levels coming down, but so too are those around you. And mine, which is helpful because I have quite a lot of adrenaline in me being up here speaking. So a little mindful minute that can help us to cultivate joy. So why have I got Champagne up here? Why do I speak about this? I have a South African accent because my parents left Champagne. So my whole family are from the Champagne region in France. They got married, they left, they went to South Africa on honeymoon and ended up staying there for 52 years, during which time I was born. They are now back in Champagne, which is great because I get to bring 12 bottles of champagne back with me every time I visit them. That's the allowance. And I was brought up between South Africa and France. Here's a photograph of my very first visit to France. It was on my first birthday. That is me and my mum. It does look like she's giving me champagne to drink, n'est-ce pas? She says that she was letting the bubbles pop under my nose. So you can understand why I've been enthralled and intrigued by this beverage from such a young age. In the front of the photo, can you see there's a glass and it's balancing on some other glasses? So whenever my family got together and we had champagne, which is basically all the time, they didn't wait for special occasions, they would often serve champagne in that tower. So my father would stack the glasses and then pour the champagne in the top glass and it would overflow and fill the others. By the way, it was always placed on a silver tray, so any spillage my mother would pour into her glass. That was it. And I love this image of this tower of champagne because it makes me think of all of us at some point in our lives are responsible potentially for helping others feel effervescent. So if you're a parent, a sister, a friend, a colleague, whether you're sitting with a patient, there will be a time where you need to be at the top of that tower and have enough effervescence, not only for you to feel uplifted, alive, energized, joyful, but also be able to overflow and fill others. And if you aren't, are you able to find those people that can help you? Because there will be times where our energy isn't up, when we don't feel effervescent, and that's when it's really important to be able to connect with others that we know that can help us, so that we're able to collectively, through these very crazy, adventurous times that we find ourselves, keep the sense of upliftment and effervescence. So what I'd like to do is share with you a little bit about the champagne process. And it provides an extraordinary metaphor for well-being. So initially, when champagne is made, and so I live in West Sussex, so I love English sparkling wines, which are also champagnes, but you can't call them champagnes because the French are quite particular about where champagne can come from, but it's the same method. Generally, champagne or an English sparkling wine is made using 3 grapes: Chardonnay, Pinot Meunier, and Pinot Noir. And those 3 grapes also require seasons. And we're going to chat in a moment about how the cycle of the seasons are not only important for a harvest for wine, but specifically for you, especially if you want to rest well. And then, of course, once the grapes are picked, there's a certain amount of pressing that needs to take place in order to get the best juice out of the grapes. So likewise, we need a certain amount of pressing, of stress, to get the best out of us. But most of us today are experiencing chronic long-term stress, which is not good. Here's an exercise. I invite you to take your right or left hand and imagine you've got a bunch of grapes in it. And then I'd like you to press, so squeeze on the grapes. You've really got to get all that juice out of the grapes. So keep squeezing, keep squeezing. There's still some juice left in the grapes. Keep squeezing. What has happened to your breath? Holding it, yeah. So you can breathe and you can relax, you can let go of the grapes. There's a direct correlation between tension, stress, and our body often contracts, our muscles get tense, especially around the jaw, the neck, the shoulders, and we then hold our breath. So if this is the one thing you take from today, this could help you to feel so much more effervescent and relaxed and better manage stress, is to relax your muscles, but specifically around the shoulders, the neck, and the head, but also to breathe. Because we breathe, thank goodness we don't need to think about that, but we often breathe very shallow and quick when we're under stress. And it's not a good idea to not be getting enough oxygen in your system. It can make you feel tired. That's why we end up grabbing maybe extra caffeine, looking for more sugar. We don't have energy to feel like we want to do things, like maybe going for a walk after work. Breathing is a very, very important part of our well-being. And then after the pressing, the wine gets fermented and it goes through this beautiful, intricate blending process, which makes me think of work-life integration and how we've got to continuously blend how we manage work and a sense of joy in life. Then the wine has to rest. There's lots of resting in good wine making. Very important, the same as for us as humans. This is the magical part. This is what makes champagne or an English sparkling wine or a cup classique, which uses the champagne method, different to, say, Prosecco, because Prosecco is carbonated, where the gas is pushed into the bottle. Here, with champagne, like this bottle, the fermentation has to happen in the bottle where the beverage is sold. It's quite a magical process. They add a bit of sugar and yeast. They add sugar. How's that? Having sugar as part of a magical process. We need to add in sweetness into our lives. So we're going to chat about that as well when we look at the seasons. And then there's this process called la prise de mousse, which means the capturing of the sparkle. And that's where this beautiful fermentation takes place, so that when you do pop a cork, I didn't know in terms of health and safety if I'd be able to pop the champagne bottle on stage. But if I can, I sometimes do that. And you know that feeling that we get when you hear a cork leave a bottle? It often makes us feel joyful and happy. So if we want to feel effervescent and joyful and happy, it's important for us to add some sweetness in and also to have this process of resting. You know, champagne has to rest for a minimum of 15 months, sometimes up to 3 years before it can actually be sold. And then we get the bottling and we get to the opportunity where we can raise a glass and say Santé or cheers. So let's take a look at the very start of this process. I mentioned that there are 3 grapes. I've already shared what I feel the 3 key ingredients are for well-being. So they relate to how we think, how we feel, and how we act. Because our thoughts determine our emotions determine our actions. And what helps with well-being is to keep a curious mindset around how we think and around our mental health. How we feel starts with actually checking in with ourselves, so connecting with ourselves and then connecting with others, and then potentially choosing to find moments of joy, or at least thinking about how can I be effervescent, more energized. Because when we have lots of energy, we feel like we can do anything, right? We can move mountains. But when we don't have energy, when we're feeling burnt out and deflated and the opposite of anything sparkling, then everything just feels like a huge mountain and perhaps can feel insurmountable. And as I mentioned, it's not the big things that we do, it's the small things that we do day to day, and the paying attention to the red flags that can come up. So this is a photograph that I took right before the first lockdown happened, actually. I was in South Africa, so it's a South African wine farm. And have you ever noticed that sometimes at the end of rows of vines, there are roses? Does anybody know why they would plant roses at the end of vines? Because it would be a very expensive exercise just to look good. Yeah, it's there as a safety mechanism. So the roses will get affected by a certain mildew before the vine does. And if the roses are struggling, then the vineyard manager certainly will pay attention, because the consequence is that the whole crop can be lost. So what are your roses? What are your red flags? How do you know that your first line of defense is starting to struggle? And if you don't pay attention, potentially you could end up losing the whole crop, falling ill, having a really rough time maybe with your sense of effervescence. And often it's helpful to think about, how am I mentally, how am I in my emotions, and how is my energy? Those are three places that can give us signs. And we're all different and unique. You know, some of us might find that we get extroverted, we just want to go out and distract ourselves or watch lots of, binging on Netflix. Some of us might feel more withdrawn and avoidant, and then you stop doing things that generally give you joy. You don't speak to people. Often our body will give us symptoms and signs. So our digestion isn't that great, we struggle with sleep, and that's why I'd like to speak about sleep in a moment. And our sense of effervescence, that inner joy that I spoke about, seems harder and harder to cultivate. And what's really interesting for me is, if you want a good harvest for wine or any form of sparkling drink, you have to have all the seasons before, especially the winter. Because during the winter, when it's potentially maybe cold and dry, and the vines struggle because of the drought and the temperature change, they actually get stronger. So vines that are exposed to a difficult time or harsher climates, as long as it's not too much, they get stronger, their root system gets better. They actually produce better quality grapes that then produce a better wine. So when we go through, we all will, all the time, life is not meant to be a journey of constant joy. In fact, I think joy is made more special and significant because we have moments of melancholy, loss, questioning. And so if we look at the seasons, I have a framework that has helped me a lot, because I used to be a real insomniac. It was really hard for me to sleep. And this approach of using the seasons has helped me, and perhaps it can help you. So if you think of the seasons, spring, summer, autumn, winter, and you overlap them onto a 24-hour period, what do I mean by spring? So spring is when you wake up in the morning. So as you're waking up because your alarm went off or the dog barks, or you've maybe got kids, or maybe you woke up on your own. But once you become conscious, that's your spring. And for me, summer starts when you pick up your phone or you engage with the outside world through social media or emails or WhatsApps or texts, and you don't know what's going to come in, and that might affect how you feel. You may not be happy, for instance, because you've seen something that's upsetting in the news. And then once we're in summer, we're going about our day to day, we go to work, we get a lot done. Just like in nature, we have autumn, where the days start to get shorter, and the leaves start to turn brown and they start to fall down. Then we get into winter. Winter is when you're in bed, putting your head on the pillow, and you're wanting to sleep for the next maybe 7 or 9 hours, depending on how much time you choose to be in bed. So let's see, because the quality of your sleep, your winter, that time where you hibernate, is determined by how you start your day. This was revolutionary for me in terms of me helping myself manage my insomnia and feel more effervescent. When you wake up in the morning, it's a bit like the morning mist or fog. It can take a bit of time for things to clear out. It's a beautiful state in the mind, because when we sleep, we drop into delta brainwave, which is where dreams happen, and emotional regulation, really important for mental health. And then as we start waking up, we move through theta, and then alpha. Alpha is where magic happens. That's where you are your most creative, and all parts of the brain are online. That's why we sometimes come up with solutions or remember things when we're doing something creative, or we're in the shower or walking the dog, when we're not in the analytical mind, which is what we call beta brainwave. And you may know about this already. But if you wake up in the morning and you engage with your phone or any form of outside news, you will immediately start moving into beta brainwave. You might produce some adrenaline, some cortisol, so now you go into the fight or flight response. And so your chemistry, your physiology changes. And you may have woken up feeling pretty good, but because you didn't connect with yourself first, you then saw something or reacted to something else, and then you change the way that you were feeling. And there's so much in our day that we can't regulate, strikes and staff shortages and whether equipment arrives back on time or your colleague's mood or how the surgeon shows up. There's so much out of our control, so that when we think about, those moments when I'm in a little bit more of my own bubble at the start of the day, how could I protect those bubbles so that I can have some effervescence that I can carry into my day, potentially to help you, yourself, or maybe even a colleague feel a little bit better. And one way to do this, a lot of the science now is showing that spending 15 minutes in the morning, so in the first hour of waking up, if you're able to step outdoors or stand in a doorway and look at the horizon or up towards the tree line and let natural light come in through the retina, it hits what we call photochemoreceptors of the brain that are part of the stress cycle. It helps produce wakefulness, so you start feeling more effervescent. It also helps to regulate the circadian rhythm so that you get a better cortisol response, and so later at night when you need to sleep, your melatonin is doing its thing. How many of you are waking up in the morning and spending 15 minutes outdoors? If you've got a dog and you're walking your dog, you're probably doing that, right? If you're not, is there maybe a possibility that this could be the one thing that you try? And if 15 minutes feels like too much, you could start with 2. Make your cup of tea. The idea, though, is not to go to the back door or stand in the garden or step outside with the phone and then looking down at the screen. Because you're meant to be looking up at the natural light. And this was the one thing that shifted my sleep patterns and behaviors. It was incredible. A colleague said to me, "Do you do this?" And I said, "Well, my place is, I used to live in a loft." And I said, "There's lots of light." And she goes, "No, that's not right. You need to be outdoors." And so I did. And I could not believe the impact it had on my sleep, which was hours and hours later. Now that I've done the research and I understand the science, it's incredible. So perhaps give this a try. And while you're standing outside for those 5 minutes, maybe 15, having a cup of tea or connecting with yourself or nature, you could bring in some of that deep, slow breathing. So now you've done 3 things at once. And when we start our day putting ourselves first, it's such a powerful declaration that we're important. Even if nothing else goes our way and all kinds of things go wrong and you just don't feel joyful at all, you've done something for you. Because before you know it, you're going to be pulled into summer. You're going to be busy, rushing around, and then there's a lot out of our control. So during your working day, is there a possibility that you could come back to your breath as a place of rest? Because any champagne, any sparkling wine, any wine actually that needs to ferment, has to lie down and rest. And so there's this beautiful, intricate balance between effervescence and fermentation and rest and stability and quietness and stillness. And we live such connected lives where we have access to information all the time, and there's this addictive nature of these phones and devices that drives dopamine in the wrong way, and so it's hard to stop and rest. And sometimes it's not enough to get into bed at night and get rest there. But during the day, could you take one deep breath, like right now? How is your breath? Perhaps you've forgotten, Take a deep breath in and fill your lungs with air, and as you breathe out, let your shoulders drop and your face relax. Yeah. These little moments that we give ourselves are like the bubbles that over time, as long as we're consistent with them, they are far more important than intensity. I always say consistency trumps intensity when it comes to well-being. It's much better to do a few things for much longer than one big thing every now and again. And something else during the day, I mentioned the author of this book, The Happiness Advantage. So he's a Harvard professor who lives and breathes all things to do with happiness. And one of the things that they found in their research is going 2 minutes inwards with your breathing could help not only to help you, but help those around you. Another thing was having a gratitude practice. Does anybody have a gratitude practice of any kind? Maybe writing down in a gratitude journal or at the dinner table, asking the family what went well today. If you do 2 minutes of thinking about what you're grateful for, it actually doesn't matter what you're grateful for or what you write down. It's the scanning in your mind that drives optimism bias. That means we start to look for things to be grateful for. And people that have a gratitude practice generally appear to be happier or more joyful. This is also something that takes just 2 minutes. It's something that I also started a few years ago. And when I have one of my not so great mental health days, I just don't feel effervescent or joyful, I will go to my gratitude journal and page through it and reach out to one person that I notice when I'm paging, oh, I had lunch with Lisa. And I'll send her a note and say, hey, do you remember today, 2 years ago, we had lunch? And in that, I've also, as Dawn spoke about, the act of kindness is so important. When we're kind or do something for somebody else, it also makes us feel good. So having a gratitude practice of some kind can also be very powerful. And if you haven't seen this TED Talk, I feel it's one of the best 16 minutes that you'll spend. Has anybody seen it? Ingrid Fettel-Lee? It's called Where Joy Hides and How to Find It. And she also studies how the natural world around us creates opportunities for us to feel joy. And none of this is woo-woo stuff. Everything is backed by science where they can see what happens in the brain and what happens to our hormone levels. And it's simply, like here's an example. If you look around the room, this auditorium, look out for a bright color of any kind. There's quite a few bright greens and beautiful out. So noticing color was one of the things that they picked up on. And also certain shapes and certain activities and things like Google eyes and confetti and tree houses and flowers. And it's a really beautiful talk. I've watched it probably a dozen times. And each time I watch it, I notice something else. And then I start spotting. They call it joy spotting. You start looking for things to be happy about while you're catching a train, while you're traveling, while you're doing day-to-day things. I think we should be working at our mental health specifically through this lens of joy proactively, just like we would if we wanted to be fit and we wanted to go for walks. Very important. Then when we get to the end of our day, just like we have this autumn season where things start to slow down and get a bit colder before we actually have the hibernation of winter, we also need to slow down. And this can be hard, right? There's a lot of pressure. I know that many of us work many shifts. There's multiple cases going on. We're absolutely exhausted. And so if you want to have that prise de mousse, that capturing of the sparkle inside the bottle, do you remember there was an ingredient that they add? Sugar and yeast. The yeast is important, but there's got to be a bit of sugar as well. Have you got enough sugar that you're adding into your diet? And by that, I don't mean M&Ms or wine gums or sweets. But I mean, like the Italians speak about la dolce far niente, like adding sweetness into life. What makes you happy? Have you got a hobby? Is there something for you to look forward to outside of work? Because I know that I'm standing, and it's an honor to stand in front of carers. But as carers, we can often carry. And when we carry too much, we get weighed down and tired. It takes away our sense of effervescence. So there's also perhaps something to be curious about is, how can I care and care a lot, but not be weighed down and carry things? And perhaps something that could help is give yourself that sweetness through a hobby, through activities, small things. For me, it's reading books in French so that I can keep my French up. I really enjoy jive dancing, and sometimes I'm so tired, and I give myself permission. I'm going to go, and I can leave after 3 dances. But I never leave after 3 dances. I end up staying and doing like maybe 10 or 20, and I feel fantastic afterwards. I met with a friend yesterday who goes to rock choir every week. And he said that his mental health would not be the way it is if he didn't go to rock choir once a week. That's his thing. When we have something in our diaries that brings us joy, we also look forward to it. So what are you looking forward to? What do you have that helps you to feel effervescent? And of course, if it can be more than once a week, great. But at least start with that, because we cannot always wait for the summer to feel good. I mean, especially not this summer, right? I don't know what's happening up north, but down south, it's a strange time. Yeah. It could be something simple, like listening to music more often. And if you're very busy and you've got kids and lots of demands and other people that you care for, maybe it is just, sitting for a minute in the car as you get to the home, just before you go through the front door, and taking a few deep breaths, messaging a friend, listening to some music. Maybe doing some kind of art that's cost-effective and easy, like adult doodling, for instance. If you would like some ideas, you're welcome to be in touch with me, because I created a handout for a client that said, well, what are some more ideas of these things that we could be doing that bring us joy? For me, it's also spending time in the kitchen. Like, I love to cook. So if I give myself the joy of trying a new recipe, for instance. And once again, all this stuff, especially saying yes to ourselves when we are carers and no to others, can be very difficult. It requires having clear boundaries. And you know, in France, there's a very clearly demarcated area with clear boundaries of where the grapes come from that make champagne. If you use grapes outside of that area, it's not champagne, it's crémant, it's something else. And so if you want to stay effervescent, if you want to have your type of sparkling bubbliness and liveness, what are the boundaries that you need? And they've also got to change at times. I think especially with the seasons, our boundaries can be quite different. I know that in winter, I've got to be really more particular about how much sleep I get. Summer seems to be different. I can get away with less sleep. So my bedtime, the boundary then shifts, just as an example. And talking about bedtime, when you do get into bed and you want to hibernate, are you getting really good quality restful sleep? Can I ask, show of hands, who would like better sleep or more sleep? Wow, all right. So I'm not going to go into detail about what you can do at bedtime. I wanted to spend time around what you can do during the day. So start off your morning with natural light, and soothing your nervous system is a great place to start. Then during the day, remember to breathe deeply, because the more tense we are, the higher the adrenal system gets activated, the more adrenaline and cortisol we have, the less likely we are to fall asleep restfully, because we're so wound up. So we're tired, but we're wired. And I've had that experience of tossing and turning or waking up in the middle of the night and then you just can't switch off. And you won't practice something at 2 or 3 a.m. that you haven't practiced during the day. So if you haven't got techniques that can help you relax, or mindfulness techniques or relaxation techniques, it's a good idea to try practice them in the day when the stakes are low, so that in the middle of the night, or when you're trying to fall asleep, when it can really feel overwhelming, I've been there, that you've then got this muscle memory, so to speak. If this is another TED Talk, that's lovely. If you've got a lot of time, you can read the book. So Matthew Walker, who's probably the global expert on sleep, has written a book, Why We Sleep. And he also shares a lot of information on podcasts, because I don't have time to read all the books that I want to read. So I usually listen to authors on podcasts. So lovely in terms of the temperature that we need at night, because we need a cooler temperature, very dark. I never used to put earplugs in, and now I use those swimming ones, the silicone ones, that don't go into the ear canal and hurt, just on the outside. I sleep even more deeply when I've got those in. I didn't realize how sensitive I was to noise. You can also experiment with different forms of white noise and brown noise. There's many different ideas that, once again, if you need some ideas, you can also reach out to me, and I've got a sleep guide that I put together with some tips. If you are struggling with sleep, it is very important, an hour before you go to bed, if you would like to fall asleep with more ease, you definitely need to have no screens around. Because the light, we know, reduces melatonin. It also sparks our thought processes. We also don't know what we're going to get exposed to, so potentially that can shift our mood, and the prefrontal cortex just stays engaged. So ideally, making time to not have any of those devices around. And then, anybody know what NSDR is, or have you tried it? Non-sleep, deep rest. It's a relaxation technique that has been studied to help relax the nervous system and the mind. Would you like to try a 3-minute NSDR technique now? All right. Okay. What we may do afterwards is stand up and stretch so that you don't fall asleep as we wrap up. So NSDR techniques you can find in a lot of these apps like Calm and Insight Timer. There's also a lot available on YouTube. Is that the rain? That's lovely. It's nice. But here we go. Here, I'll just do about 3 minutes so you can get a feel for it. Once again, like we did at the start when I asked you to bring your awareness to your heart and your breath, Allow your gaze to drop down so that you're not constantly stimulated by visuals. And if you're comfortable, you can close your eyes. And notice your feet being supported by the ground and the chair supporting the back of your legs. And take a deep breath in through your nose. And a long exhale through your mouth. And what I'm going to do is ask you to bring your awareness to various different body parts. There's no way to get this right or wrong. Simply follow my voice. I'd like you to bring your awareness to your right hand, right wrist, right forearm, elbow, upper arm, right shoulder. Bring your awareness to your left hand, left wrist, left forearm, elbow, upper arm, left shoulder. Bring your awareness to your forehead, your eyes, your nose, your lips, your chin, the back of your head and your neck. Now bring your awareness to your shoulders, front and back, down across your chest, your abdomen, your belly. Include your spine, scanning from the top of your neck, down the upper back, mid-back, lower back. Bring your awareness to your hips, your pelvic girdle, your buttocks, right and left. Bring your awareness to your right upper leg, your thigh and your hamstring, your right knee, back of your knee, your right shin and calf, right foot, the heel of your foot, your sole, and your toes. And bring your awareness to your left leg, the top of your leg, your thigh and your hamstring, your knee, front and back, your left shin and calf, and your left foot, your heel, your sole of your foot, and your toes. And from this place of scanning your body, in your own time, take 2 deep, nourishing breaths, breathing in through your nose and exhaling through your mouth, allowing your body to feel heavier and sinking a little bit more towards the ground. And very slowly, before you open your eyes, if they are closed, bring some movement to your hands and your feet. Maybe wriggle your toes and move your hands, circle your shoulders, and slowly open your eyes and let the light back in. Phew, I feel the whole energy in the room. I'm seeing so many yawns. That means your parasympathetic nervous system is in gear. Your vagal tone is going, and that is beautiful. It could mean that you're really exhausted too. I mean, I know it's been a busy conference. So what I invite you to do maybe is just shake a bit. If you want to stand for 5 seconds, shake as if you've got water in your hands. Just bring a little bit more life into your body. Maybe wave at somebody behind you, and then you can take a seat again. Wonderful. So that process, that scanning, is the basic recipe for a non-sleep deep rest. It's a very powerful way to relax your body. If you want to try these before you go to sleep at night, very helpful. Or if you wake up at night and you can't get back to sleep, there's a few that I've downloaded, so they're always on my phone, and I don't need to activate because I sleep with my phone on flight mode so that I don't get disturbed or tempted to look at messages. And the more you do them, the easier it gets. If you found my voice relaxing, I have a 9-minute NSDR that I'm happy to WhatsApp or send to anyone. Just message me. And you'll have my contact details, and they're on the card as well, so you can reach out to me if you'd like that. That brings my awareness to the card. Right, what is this about? Because now we're coming towards the finish line. So this well calculator, or the Wellculator, is a framework that I put together many years ago, and I use myself as a way to benchmark my well-being. And we won't go into all the aspects of the Wellculator today because we've already been through 4 of them. But what I did want to point out is it's a really useful tool to score yourself with. So if you have a pen, you could do your scoring now, or you could activate your prefrontal cortex and we can go through it together. And very quickly, I'd like you to give yourself a point if you answer yes. So if you say, yes, I do strategically refuel, then that gives you 1 point. If you don't do it, then that means you don't get a point for that one, so that you end up with a score out of 10. Make sense? All right, so without overthinking it, do you have a strategy around the way that you feed yourself? So generally, most of the time, do you have snacks and meals and food that help your energy levels stay high? Or do you end up having snackcidents, or what I call maybe snack amnesia, where you just end up missing meals and grabbing whatever you can, or just having far too much coffee? Yes or no? If it's yes, 1 point. If it's no, no point for now. Do you eat like an artist and support gut health? So important if you want to keep your sense of effervescence and joy, because mental health is connected to the second brain, which is in the gut. And for that, we need to eat at least about 8 servings of colorful foods. So plant-based foods, so vegetables and salads and fruits, for instance. Yes or no? Yes, 1 point. Number 3, we've spoken about already, is would you say that you bring in mindfulness practices, like 2 minutes a day of going inward and slowing down your breath? So let's just focus on that for today. We're not going to look at the portion control. Do you bring in some mindfulness practices? And number 4 is about hydration. I know that we've got these beautiful gifts, thank you, the water bottles. It's so important to stay hydrated, because if you're not, your energy can drop. You won't feel effervescent. You might get a headache, and you can also feel that you're hungry, but it's actually a false trigger to eat. So do you generally drink enough water? And there's a formula that I use. 1 glass of water for every 10 kilograms that you weigh. And a glass is 250 mils. Then number 5, do you know your health numbers? So really important, do you know your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your blood sugar? Those are the minimum ones we should check at least once a year, because stress impacts them. And then, of course, there's others that we can look at too, but we won't go into those details now. Number 6, we've spoken about. Do you wake up feeling rested on most days of the week? So how's your sleep? Number 7 is, do you have ways to build the sense of positive mindset? So things like a gratitude practice, or spending time in nature, or prayer, or solitude, or practicing different mindfulness and meditation techniques, or heart coherence. And then number 8 is, are you moving strategically during your work day? So I know that many of you are on your feet, you're not always perhaps at a desk, but are you moving and activating that helps you stay energized in the day? And number 9 is, are you doing enough actual exercise? So we know that we should be walking about half an hour on most days of the week. That's really good for helping the body regulate the stress response. And then number 10, do you know your roses? You know those red flags in the vineyard? In the vineyard, do you know when your body is potentially over-triggered by stress? And have you got techniques that can help you? Ideally in the moment, as opposed to saying something that you regret, or doing something, or feeling so exhausted that you then need a holiday. So the Wellculator is a really useful tool, and if you score yourself, there's space for you to come back maybe in 2 months' time, and you can do it 2 or 3 times. And if you would like a PDF version of this that you can save, you can also find that on my website. It really is a remarkable tool. I use it myself and with thousands and thousands of individuals. And today, we specifically looked at how to bring in some mindfulness by connecting with yourself for 2 minutes a day and slowing down your breathing. We looked at the seasons as a framework for helping you get better rest, starting with how you start your morning. We looked at cultivating this positive mindset by perhaps using a gratitude practice, or joy spotting, or thinking, or just being curious about how can you celebrate more? How can you bring in a sense of joy or gratitude, even if it is just a walk in nature? And so, actually, let me just bypassed the fourth one. And then we also looked at the importance, if we look at the vines, how we need to notice when stress potentially becomes too much. And remember when you were pressing and pressing those grapes in your hand, the link between the breath and constriction. So just starting with relaxing the body and breathing deeply is a great place to start reducing the impacts of stress. Without even needing to think about things like therapy, because stress is a physical response. It starts in the body. And so if we have techniques to help the body relax, we can help minimize that enormously. So now, I would love you to really think about, okay, well, it's been a long conference and there's lots going on in your head and perhaps also in your heart. But is there something that from this time that we've spent together that you can take back with you to really get, I guess, some ROI, some sparkle, some effervescence? And so one of these three things is what I recommend you maybe think about, is if you think about how you think, is there something that you're curious about based on our time together? So is there anything that I might have mentioned that you're like, I'm curious about knowing more about that? For instance, how does my breathing potentially lower cortisol of somebody next to me? And then in terms of your own connection with yourself, is how will you connect with your heart? Will it be in the morning? Will you just ask yourself as you lie in bed, how am I today? How am I feeling? Before you engage with the phone or start caring for everybody else. Or maybe it could be something around the celebration piece. So how will you allow a little bit more joy? How will you find champagne moments without having to wait for actually opening a bottle of champagne? Because anyway, we know that alcohol is not actually good for our well-being. It's also why I quite like the way my family approaches champagne is quality over quantity. It's always drunk in very small amounts. But you don't need to be drinking. I'm not here to sell champagne. It's about the symbolism of what it stands for, that celebration, that effervescence, the connection. So what I invite you to do is I'm going to give you a couple of minutes and I'd like you to chat with somebody close to you and share, what are you curious about? Or how are you going to connect with yourself? Or how are you going to bring in some celebration? So please take 2 minutes to share with somebody close to you. Thank you. Thank you. Would anybody like to share what their one thing is? You just need to project your voice. I'd love to hear it. Yes, Dawn. You're going to stop using your phone first thing in the morning. Anyone else joining Dawn in doing that? I thought there might be. All right. Well, you can buy regular alarm clocks. Yeah? And a lot of the sleep experts and even mental health experts say that we should keep our phones out of the bedroom. So they should be, charge them in the kitchen or downstairs or in the living room, in another room, and create some distance. Make your spring longer than 30 seconds. We wake up, we reach over, and that's the first thing we do. I'm delighted. That's the thing that you've chosen. So that one thing that you might be curious about, The one thing that you're thinking about, actually, I can do that in order to connect with myself more or to feel more celebratory. This becomes your strategy. You forget about everything else that I've shared, because you can always come back to this. I'm not sure if the session is being recorded. You can reach out to me. I would be honored if you would consider me one of your well-being partners. But this one thing becomes your strategy to own the title CEO. And for me, that is Chief Effervescent Officer, because no one is going to make you joyful, because that's happiness, right? If we rely on people and circumstances, that's out of our control, that's happiness. Joy is that inner quality of effervescence. Imagine yourself as like the sparkling, bubbling drink, whatever you want it to be. And it's not the big dramatic things, remember, it's the small little things like choosing not to look at our phone first thing in the morning. Those things that we do consistently are what builds a life that feels effervescent and joyful. And when it's not that joyful, it's all right, because we've got the ability to bounce back. And remember, when we go through hard times like those difficult seasons, it actually makes the vine, the grapes, stronger, better. It can do the same for us. If you would like to download the Wellculator and get access to me taking you through it in a little bit more detail than we did today, you can find that on my website. You've also got help, and I hope that some of you are using it, for instance, through the association, Together All, and I think through the NHS, Safe Space. Is that right? There's resources out there, and we also need to connect and care for each other. Because when we look after each other, we lift the collective tide of well-being, and that lifts all boats, right? So yeah, I think on that note, I'd like to enjoy the gala dinner, and every time from today you see somebody lifting a glass, I hope that you will wish for yourself Santé, which is bonne santé, good health for yourself and for them, and that you'll remember to celebrate.